Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Leadership Enigma. Welcome if you're listening to us on all your major podcast platforms, or indeed now watching us on the newly available YouTube channel as well. Well, how can I describe this episode? Well, perhaps now for something completely different, because I've got a studio full of amazing young leaders, and we're going to ask ourselves, I think, a couple of really cool questions. And one of those is, what do young leaders and young talent really need from their leadership and their culture in order to thrive and be happy at work? And also, what do they aspire to become as leaders themselves as they take over the organisations that they're working with right now? And let's be honest, make the world a better place. Come back to me just after this break.
You're listening to The Leadership Enigma, powered by Transform Performance International, a podcast for the insatiably curious to explore the power of human-centered leadership to create real momentum for positive and sustainable change. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or corporate executive, each week we speak to global experts, academics, rising stars, ambitious upstarts, and disruptors as we discover that success leaves clues. Now, here's your host, Adam Pacifico.
Hi, welcome back to The Leadership Enigma. I said to you, this is going to be different because I have a studio full of wonderful people. Now, firstly, this episode is in collaboration with Heidrick Struggles, who are a premier provider of culture shaping, leadership development, and senior executive search. Well, I would say that because guess what? We all work for Heidrick Struggles. So I think I need to do some kind of introductions because we really are a studio full for the first time. This is the first time on the Enigma. We've had 5 of us in the studio, so I'm going to work my way from right to left. So, Floris, say hi, introduce yourself. Away you go.
Morning, Adam. Morning, everyone out there. My name is Floris Hondmann. I'm an analyst in our London office, and I have the great pleasure of writing a few articles for the Voices of Future Leaders. And I'm really excited to be here today.
It's good to have you here. Okay, next in line, Leah.
Hi, Adam. I'm Leah Evers. I'm also in the London office. I am a consultant with Heidrick Struggles, and I'm really excited to be here and share a little bit about what we aspire to be as future leaders and what we are expecting from people like yourself as leaders.
Very good. No pressure whatsoever. Next.
Hello, I'm Sarah Sage. I'm also a consultant in the London office, and I'm really excited to be part of this podcast today. Also to the team that we're here all together, but also just to share a bit about our experiences, our not necessarily expectations, but perhaps hopes on what we want leaders to be like and how we can inspire and, our role in the upcoming world.
Thank you. Fourth guest.
Hi, I'm Jacob Vincent. I'm super excited to also be on this podcast. I'm a consultant in the London office, and I've just got back from a 6-month sabbatical, so I'm sure we'll discuss that in depth on this podcast.
We will. I want to know all about that, trust me. So this episode is all about the voices of future leaders, and that's you. And I think it's so important that we have this conversation. In fact, Heidrick understand the importance of this because you've all been on a little bit of a journey anyway, haven't you? This is not an isolated thing in relation to exploring voices of future leaders. Someone tell me a little bit about what's the journey that you've been on that Heidrick is taking you on in relation to learning more and trying to use that information. Who wants to kind of give me a bit of an overview of the journey?
Isn't you asking in terms of journey, personal experiences?
Yeah.
Or... Well, I'll happily start. I guess I joined Heidrick in 2021 in October, and as a consultant, really getting exposure in different ranges of projects with different partners, but different consultants and different analysts that we work with. But also it's more about the clients and really also establishing the world post-COVID or coming out of COVID, and what impact that has had on the way we communicate, the way clients actually approach us, but also about how we work with each other. That hybrid working style, getting to understand each other on a completely new level. So that's been really exciting, but also really opportunistic, I would say.
I think we're going to get into so many of those subjects. And actually already a big shout out to TA, who I know is just in the green room with James, because actually if it wasn't for TA, she's very much the momentum behind a lot of the efforts here. So it's a huge thank you. Leah, I'm going to come to you because how did this come about? How did this podcast come about? Come on, tell us a story.
Well,
Dublin.
Dublin last year conference for the more junior people, and you were present, and it was towards the end, and you were sitting at a booth in one of the hotel lounges, and we came up to you and said, "Hey, Adam, we know you have this podcast. It's really great. We love it. However, what about the future leaders? You have so many people on there, so many different types of leaders, but have you considered the voices of those who will step into those shoes?" And I think you reflected, and when we were back in the office, said, "Hey, you said something. Let's make this happen." And then we spoke to TA, and we had this Voices of Future Leaders already in the works, and now we're here.
So it's a massive thank you, isn't it, for actually coming up. It was actually in the bar, let's be honest, in Dublin, coming up and saying, how about this idea? And I'm glad we did it. Now, let's start. There's a bit of an umbrella purpose, isn't it? I think we probably all subscribe to, and that's a world better led. But I'm really keen to hear from all of you. What do you mean by or consider a world better led is all about? So, Jacob, I'll start with you if I can. Well, world better led, what does it mean? It's personal, but what is it?
For me personally, it's all about the fact that we live in a very complicated world.
Yep.
And there's a lot going on a lot of the time, and it puts a lot of pressure and stress on you as an individual. And so when we're in a workplace, it's how can our leaders create greater clarity and simplify the problems that we're facing, so that when it comes to our own individual work, it makes it a lot easier to understand exactly what's required of us and what is needed. And just to kind of simplify this kind of very complicated world we live in.
And that's what I'm really keen to explore with all of you, because I think this is personal. I always say that leadership is actually deeply personal. Mm-hmm. So a world better led has also got to be personal, I reckon. So Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think if, thinking back of how I've grown up in Germany, both parents working, being role models in terms of, what do you want to achieve and where you want to go, but really also driving that, how can you make things better, and actually them providing more opportunities for me, or giving me the space to actually explore those opportunities. And I think that's also something that I look for in, or in companies that I have been with. But also that's what I really like about Heidrick, because you get those opportunities, and that's what I would want in a leader.
And we're going to pick up on that theme of space as well a little bit later too, I hope. So Leah, your thoughts, world better led?
A world better led is one where you can be yourself in a way that suits your needs. I think it's all about human-centered leadership. The fact that profit is no longer at the core. Profits matter, we know, we're a business, we understand it, but it's about more than that. It's about people, it's about purpose, it's about the planet. It's more. I think COVID really made us realize how much time we spend at work, and we're no longer willing, and I don't think it's just the younger generations, we're no longer willing to spend this time doing something that doesn't fulfill us, working with people who we feel don't respect us. So I think we purposefully choose. I know I purposefully chose my place of work because of the culture and because of the people, because it's more than, we're not just a machine, we are individuals, and there are so many mechanisms around that.
Sure. Okay. And I think there's a very powerful lesson there, isn't there? It's and not or in relation to profits. Yes, we've got to be sustainable. We've got to make sure that we can actually keep the lights on, and there's now got to be very, very strong mission, purpose, values around that too. Floris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Leah touched on it, the kind of the paradigm shift since COVID on what's expected from leaders. What I really enjoy about this platform is that we've kind of moved beyond a top-down structure to leadership. I don't expect, and I think most people don't expect, leaders to have all the answers anymore. And this program allows us to kind of to help leaders. So to have a conversation on around things that Leah and I expect from you, and for what you expect from us.
It's a loop, isn't it? Really,
it's
got to be this loop of communication.
Yeah, and I think we're a world better led is we don't place the leadership on one person anymore, but we're a team, and we lead as a team. And this platform allows us to raise our concerns, for you to raise your concerns, and for us to have a dialogue.
Right.
Rather than you're the partner in the corner office, and we receive marching orders and off we go. I think it's become much more fluid, and in my estimation, it's relieved a bit of the burden on your end and placed some responsibility on us to lead upwards as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the corner office, actually, so I'm intrigued as to where that is. You're about to say something.
Yeah, because on that, one thing that I'd be interested to get your thoughts on, because there are a lot of conversations around the millennials, the Gen Z.
Yes.
We're a generation of cancel culture that's been thrown around a lot. And I take some issue with that because I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we're a generation of accountability. We do not expect our leaders to be perfect. I think the human-centered leadership goes both ways. We know you're human beings who have lives, who have struggles, who will not always be perfect. And we don't expect that, and I don't think we'll cancel anyone for not being perfect. What we would like is respect, and it's transparency, and the boundaries between the highest levels and the lower levels, they are no longer rigid. So it's really it's a flow, like Floris was saying.
Okay.
It's going both ways.
I've just realised, actually, you're probably going to be asking me some questions, aren't you? So that's a turnaround too. Listen, I think it's really important to understand, isn't it, that when we talk about leadership, it is about human-centered leadership. That's been a passion of mine, and it's a red thread throughout 140 odd episodes. So it's interesting you mentioned that. Cancel culture, that's also interesting. I think people are always very keen and quick to label anyone, anything. It just serves it well. Let me tell you what I actually think about, in some ways, your population, is that actually you won't stand for the nonsense that maybe existed when I was younger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there's an accountability piece that you will now hold your leaders to account. And also, that works both ways. You have to hold yourself accountable in relation to you being a role model. Because I said this, listen, I was chatting to about 40 leaders yesterday, and they were all individual contributors. So no one had a line manager, or they didn't have line management responsibilities. And I said to them, and I'll say this to you, in fact, I said this in another episode, you're already leaders. So whilst this is the voices of future leaders, you're already leaders. Let me tell you why. Every single day, you are communicating, inspiring, galvanizing, and leading people over which you have absolutely no direct authority. Is that fair?
Yeah.
You're leaders.
Yeah.
And you're also role models, because there are people who look at you and say, I need to be like Sarah, I need to be like Floris, I need to, any one of you, because they listen to you, they see you, and they think, right, that's what I need to be able to do. So you carry a huge amount of accountability and responsibility already, and you expect a huge amount, rightly so, from your leadership. Now, any thoughts on that? That's my summary.
I think it's
got everyone thinking, isn't it now?
It definitely comes back to that loop that Floris and Leah touched upon. I think it's a two-way street. You know, you give and you get, and I think especially in today's working world, when we have so many pressures, you know, from deadlines and doing a great job of high quality, but also then you have a family and you want to do everything. But, you know, I think it's really about that transparency and that communication and working together, and actually also asking for help. So, you know, if you don't know something or if you don't know how to approach it, it's about that communication piece, I think.
Okay.
And I mean, Sarah and I have just written an article on empathetic leadership. And the gist of that, without giving everything away, is that the expectations are so high because that's what we aspire to be. So when it comes to empathy, for example, we care. And right now, I think that mainly shows in the group we're in. I mean, everyone in this room, we have a very strong bond. We have a great team. There is a leadership in that we help each other. And we aspire to be that for other people. Some of us have children and they want to pass that on. I think about my younger sister and the type of environment, the corporate environment she's going to grow up in. We all have something. So the expectations are so high, and we're placing them on leaders now because that's where we aspire to step into.
Tell me a little bit more about the empathetic leader, because you also know that some of the work that I've been doing and trying to test is the 7 components of human-centered leadership. One of those is empathy. Now, where did human-centered leadership come from? It came originally probably from the interviews I did for the book. And then as I did more and more of these, I think something started to come to the forefront. And that was a differentiator, and that was human-centered leadership. And I've actually started to call it your leadership superpowers. Tell me a little bit more about empathy. And in some ways, what did the pandemic do for everybody? Because I also say I think the pandemic was a deeply personal experience for every single person, whether you're the newest intern or whether you're the most senior and experienced CEO and everything in between. The pandemic gave us all something to think about. So tell me a little bit about empathy and how that might even be linked to the experiences that we've all been through and that we're going through. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think it realigned or it allowed us to reassess what our priorities are from the very top of an organization to the bottom. From a senior leadership perspective, is it worth putting 80 hours a week into this and not seeing my family? You probably saw your family a lot more during lockdown, maybe more than some people wanted to, but it probably made you realize I value this, and I maybe had forgotten that I value this. And then from a junior perspective, is this something I want to commit the next 50 years of my life to, or am I quite happy to close my laptop at 5? With whatever the ramifications of that decision are. So I thought it was, as someone who's at the very front of his career, I got to make that decision, or I got to think about it before I got into kind of the rat race of promotion cycle, salary raises, and you just kind of roll into a career, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, I kind of lost my agency in all of this. So I really appreciated that. I'd be curious to see if you had that, and if you've held on to whatever insights you had after that period.
Well, I'm interested, and we'll come back to it for sure. The pandemic, work-life balance, does it exist? What does it mean to you? Did the pandemic completely, derail your thoughts on that? Go on, Jacob.
Go.
Well, for me personally, and I totally agree with what Floris was saying, it made you kind of reevaluate your life. When everything is taken away from you, you suddenly realize what you value and what you don't value in life. And not to plug it too much, but one of the reasons why I decided that I needed to go on a sabbatical and go traveling is because I realized I was in my 20s.
So
and I'm in like the best, in theory, in the best shape of my life, and this is the time that you want to be spending out there in the world, enjoying, exploring, being curious, and not being stuck behind a desk. So that was the real kind of motivator for me in deciding to make that decision for myself.
Let me just ask you a question off the back of this, because I'm mildly jealous about this sabbatical. But did you come back to Heidrick? Did you come back to the workplace with a big learning or an insight following your time traveling the world and doing some amazing things?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of there's obviously like the general life kind of decisions that I made while I was out there, but the one that kind of like stuck with me around work was, again, kind of what I really value in work. And it's not really necessarily like the content that I do every day. Like, I'm not interested in working on Excel or PowerPoint. That doesn't galvanize me. But what I found was the reason why I came back to Heidrick was because of the people. I enjoyed working with my colleagues, and I enjoyed kind of the space that I get from senior leaders, the respect I get from senior leaders as well, to go out there and do my work. And so they were the 3 main things where I was like, yeah, Heidrick ticks those boxes, and therefore that's why I want to come back. It wasn't necessarily that I want to go and do org design or transformations. It was more the stuff around it, which I found was really important.
Gotcha. Okay. Sarah, you were going to say something.
Well, you asked about the working during sort of pandemic and how that was. Well, actually, when the pandemic hit, I was actually on maternity leave. So for me, I was on maternity leave, from another organization that I was ready to go back to, and actually then couldn't go back to. So it ended up actually reevaluating, okay, what do I actually want to do? That was perhaps not the right business for me, and I might have to change. So it actually gave me a chance to spend really good quality time with my son, but also then taking a step back, and especially as I started a part-time PhD at that time,
Right.
or was going to as well, and had to defer it just because of the business that I was joining. So it gave me a lot of food for thought, and spending more time with family as well.
I'm going to pick up on something you just said about food for thought, because there's this wonderful phrase that I use, like, can't even remember where I got it from. That when you press the pause button on a computer, like this in front of me, it'll stop. But when you press the pause button on a human being, that's when we start to think. And actually, the pandemic pressed the big red almighty pause button on everybody. We got a chance to think and reevaluate and reflect. And Floris, you asked me a question. You said, is there a big kind of takeaway from me, the pandemic? The pandemic was deeply personal. I lost my mum during the pandemic. I almost lost my daughter during the pandemic, and that's a story for another day. And with that, it meant that that whole thing was deeply personal, but it also, in many ways, reinstated to me that I need human proximity. That I get energy from this. I've been really excited that we would do this. And we didn't have that. And so it got taken away from a number of people. Now, we're all different, introverts and extroverts. Who struggled the most? Discuss. But I think that was one of my takeaways, Floris, as you asked that, was the need for the human proximity. So when I come into the office, and I'm not just saying this, it's obvious that there's incredible young talent. And one of the questions on my mind, as if I'm viewed as one of the leaders of the business there, the partners there, is what do you need from the leadership and from the culture to thrive, to want to come in, to want to be involved? What do we need to do? And this isn't just a Heidrick thing. This is about leadership in general. Thoughts?
I think that that's sometimes the wrong question.
Okay.
So if we're going to pandemic, empathy, and combining the question you just asked, I think it also taught people how do they work. We were in this unique position where everyone, no matter the level, was in the same boat, but we were distinctively different in that my office is my bedroom still. Right. Others have their own. I know people who had to do makeshift desks out of ironing boards.
It's just like same storm, different boat.
Yeah, very different boats at times. But it also, for example, getting a little personal now. So I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I was never given the...
I do too, right?
Well, there you go.
Chronic. So you're in good company.
the inattentive. And but it allowed me to say, oh, I can work this way and I can do this so much more productive when I'm in the office. And this is a big shout out to TA. I said to her, TA is my manager, I'll stop gushing about her, but going for empathetic leadership, this is really what... No, I mean, people don't leave companies, they leave bad leaders. Yep. And, but for one, I disclosed this from the beginning, and I said there are certain things that are easier for me, certain things are harder. And I said, in the office, I've resigned to the fact that I'm not productive. And she said to me, well, that depends on how you define productivity. Networking, connecting with people, talking, what are you working on? How can I help you? Sharing information, that's productivity. But because of the rigidity that is the corporate world and what was taught to me what productive is, that didn't register. And I've now completely rethought that. But the home environment for me, when I have a report to write, when I have data to look at and analyze, the office environment, that's not for me. And before we had this hybrid work environment, I was working myself to the bone. My mental health was suffering because there were these 3 quadrants of meeting the deadline, high quality work, or maintaining my mental health. And I could only fulfill 2 of them. And because of who I am as a person, it was always my mental health that suffered. That no longer has to be the case. So it's having a leadership where you feel comfortable to say, this is how I work. Maybe you'll understand, maybe you don't, because brains work differently, as you know.
I do.
But to say, I trust you to do this. So sometimes I may not be in the office for 5 days because that is how I work. And next week I'm in for 4 days. And having that communication and being and having and it being you having that psychological safety and that space, whatever you need, and everyone in this room will need different things and thrive off different things. I know Floris is in the office a lot, and that's how you prefer to work, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't do very well working at home alone. I wouldn't say I'm the most extroverted person ever, but I get energy from other people's energy, and I think that's Adam. You and I are working for a client right now on communication and collaboration. I think that's what really defines the opportunity for the new leadership. And that goes both ways. I think the opportunity to have a dialogue between myself and yourself, so that I know what's worrying you as a leader, or what's exciting you as a leader,
Yeah.
and vice versa. What things that are that I'm worried about, or that I would like to get excited about. I think that's what I really missed during the pandemic. And what makes me happy to be in the office now is that you get more of that healthy friction, and that produces my best creativity. I think that produces some of our firm's best work, is when you get to actually have the great minds that we have at our firm working together. And yeah, that's also the only way we can keep each other accountable. I think that's maybe where I worry about our own generation, is that rightly or wrongly we get labeled as whinging. I think that's the right British word.
Snowflakes, right?
Whining, as I would say in American, without actually actioning the things that we care about. We yell from the sidelines, but we're not willing to strap our boots on and get to work. And I think that's what I enjoy about what we get to do here, and the articles that we get to write, is rather than raising our voice about things that we'd like to see different, we can now action those things and put it on your agenda. Because we can't, in my opinion, we can't expect you to read our minds. We need to also communicate our wants and needs to you. And I think that barrier has been broken down during the pandemic, and it's no longer top down, as I mentioned before, but there is an opportunity for dialogue.
So it's having that voice and making sure that voice is heard. And I'm reflecting, because I tell you what happens on this podcast a lot. Actually, it becomes very personal, because when we talk about leadership, it is very personal. And you were talking about personal things here. I'm going to tell you a story. This happened in the office 2 days ago. All right, I'm going to share. I've got multiple screens, which and people giggle. And someone came up and said, "Oh, what's with the screens?" And I said, "Oh, I've got chronic ADHD, so this is a classic example of it." And then someone came out to me the day after and they said, "Hey, thank you. I had no idea, and I didn't know that you did, and you were very open with it. And actually, I think that's something that." And so, in many ways, there's deeply personal and humbling conversations. But what I'm also hearing, and this is where you need to keep me honest, is that leadership has got to be very personal. One of my guests said that leadership is energy expensive, and I take your development really seriously. I hope that comes across, but because I'm curious, what is the background you come from? What is it you need? What is it you have to offer? How do we harness the collective? Floris, I've spoken before about energy. And I know I can be a bit much sometimes. It's like, take your foot off the gas, all right, in relation to dial it back. But Sarah and Jacob, we come to you in relation to this whole theme of personalized leadership. So you are seen, you are heard, you are understood, and you're in the conversation.
That is something that I would really like to have, because I think I'm a really personable person. So I will give that a lot to the people that I'm with, the way I listen, the way I take action and support. So when I go to my leader, I want to be heard. I want to be asked questions.
Really heard.
Yeah, really heard. And, not perhaps judged necessarily just for what happened before, but actually, what are the steps that you're going to take to make it better or to do it differently? And I think it's also about the understanding and coming back to that transparency, I think, as well. So, yeah, I think I'm a real enthusiast, so I will be forever the optimist and will never think anything bad of anyone.
Glass half full.
Always.
Always.
And yeah,
and your husband has a brewery, right?
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that, but without a doubt.
Yeah, and now I know I forgot the beers today.
I know. For the next episode, we'll do that.
Next one, yeah.
But Jacob, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's an imperative in the current climate, and I think that it's just very important to contract with whoever you're working with, whether that's a leader or someone that you're working with who might be below you, more junior, and to understand what their requirements are, and for you to clearly articulate what your requirements are, so that everyone knows there's no ambiguity in the relationship. Everyone's very clear in terms of what you need and what they want, and then what they need and what you want. So yeah, just to remove ambiguity from the equation.
Okay.
And just on that, I think also, and Jacob touched upon that already, it's about being asked, what do you want to do? And I think I have certainly experienced that a lot over the last sort of year and a half. What do you want to do? What do you want to get out of this project? How do you want to develop? And I think that it's a completely new side that I haven't seen a lot before, because actually it's also now important. What is your side and what do you want to do?
We're a really diverse office, aren't we?
Yeah, really.
And what I mean,
could be more diverse.
I agree. There's
Yeah.
always could be, but what I also mean is that I think we've got great diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Just in relation to people's backgrounds and their
Yeah.
experiences and their education, that I think gives us a very rich conversation. Let me ask you all a question. What is your view then on flexible? Because you just said that there's a certain cadence or working rhythm that works for you, slightly different from me, slightly different from... And it was interesting. We just had a conversation earlier with someone who said, actually, some businesses are sleepwalking back to maybe where we came from. It will never go back to where we were pre-pandemic. And some organizations are saying, hey, we are face-to-face. You work 5 days a week. So organizations are trying to feel their way through this. But what does hybrid mean to each of you? What does flexible working mean to you, where you feel you can get the best and you can give your best? What Floris, let me start with you. What is it? What is it for you? Because it's going to be different for each of you.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, probably the thing here.
Yeah.
But for Floris, what is it for you?
So this is something you shared with me yesterday and today.
Right?
Yeah. And I don't know if it was a guest on your podcast or just someone from your network.
I know what you're going to say. It's a shout out to Adrian Simpson. Yeah, let's bring this out. I think this is useful.
So I'll tee you up on this one.
Like a double act.
No, that you shared with me that he turns his out of office on when he's in the office.
So when you go in the office, that's when you put on your out of office. Because going into the office is not where you go and do emails and Zoom calls. You go into the office for celebration, connection, or education. I thought that was really cool.
That's a
That
really
is
good
really
Like when
idea.
you're in the
That is
office
really
all the
good.
time, Floris, celebrating.
So you come into the office because you know that actually we're going to celebrate. Okay, so let me give you an example. I'm actually going to use as an example, Floris. We've done some work, haven't we, in relation to leadership development and where we sit and what we can do. And Floris came up, and I love this from the energy. He said, why don't we get everyone together in Innovation Corner? Here's a shout out for Innovation Corner in the making, right? And reach out to all of the incredible young talent in the office. And well, Floris, what was the invite you sent out?
So we're working on professionalizing our leadership development offering as a firm. And earlier this week, we had a presentation from a partner in our DC office who's spearheading.
Shout out to
the
Regis, because it was great to bring all of that info together.
Absolutely. And what you always do on projects that we work together on is you always ask the question, so what, now what?
Yeah.
And so the idea behind our Best Idea Wins initiative is to bring everyone into the office that can come to the office and just create some ideas together, create some of that healthy friction, and see where all of us think that our leadership development offering should go. I think that's a testament to your leadership. Is you always say best idea wins. I don't care where that comes from, and if that's from the most junior person or the most senior person, as long as it's the best idea, that's what we should go for. And I think it's brilliant to do it that way. Dustin Seal, our managing partner,
Another shout out.
another shout out. He actually mentioned in we have a speaker series where partners come and we just all of our
That was in the cafe, was it?
in the cafe. We talked about hybrid working and setting boundaries. And he quite simply said, if you're coming into the office and you're doing work that you could be doing at home, and you leave the office and you haven't spoken to anyone, you've not said hi to anyone, you've not collaborated with anyone, what's the point of coming? Which is, that's puts accountability in our lab to make use of the time that we have in the office. So I think that's kind of the next step of we've labeled hybrid working as hybrid working, but how can we make hybrid work for us rather than you're hybrid because your laptop happens to be in the office today rather than at home, but we don't actually work differently at home or in the office. And we need to think about how we can make the office different and more valuable for us as a firm, but also for us as people. How can we bring people together?
Yep.
On that, I think big shout out to Culture Champions, because that's one of the big roles that we do as Culture Champions in the office as well, bringing people together, and that morale also, that, engaging. We have Shrove Tuesday now with Pancake Day and bring your own baked goods.
Love pancake.
So I think because exactly what Floris just said about that coming to the office and that cultural element and really unifying together.
You're not just culture champions, though, are you? I think you're also culture shapers and culture carriers. I think you have a huge role to play. When I come back to this, because again, this is why I love doing the podcast. So when Adrian said, when you go into the office, you put your out of office on, that just really got me thinking. And that's why I shared it with you, because I'm still processing that and thinking, and that's why I love the idea of maybe coming in, maybe we are celebrating, we are connecting, and we'll educate together. That's a pretty cool reason to come in. So let me get your answers in relation to what does hybrid or flexibility really mean to you. So Leah, you kind of gave us part of an answer, but what does that mean for you? We're all still work in progress on this, but what's the feel that you have for this?
I think it's individual. It's what works. And to Floris's point, coming in on Tuesday, I wasn't going to come in on Tuesday. I have a reason now to come in, and it makes sense to me. This idea, come into the office 3 days a week. I know a lot of organizations kind of that just doesn't make sense to me. Why would I sit in the office and be on Zoom calls for 3 hours in one go? And I think what it really comes back to is the communication between people, because you'll know this, I know this, we maybe work different than some people, but other people work in their own way. So it's about contracting with whoever I'm working with a partner who it's more productive if I'm in the office with her because we can have that time together. So it's about communicating, this is how I work, how do you work? And for that to work, because you are talking to people who are often quite more senior, is to be able to have that open communication.
Being deliberate as well.
And being deliberate. And for me, it's explaining myself, hey, I work differently. This may not make sense to you. I noticed you work differently. How can we make this work together? And everyone's been really receptive to that. But if that wasn't existing, and if someone said, I want you in the office 3 days a week, something in my life would suffer, either my personal life or my work. So what it comes back to is being allowed, like having the ability to be transparent and also getting that back. I value it so much if a leader says to me, this doesn't work for me, even if that's something that might make things a bit challenging for me, but then I know, and then how do we figure it out? Because we are individuals and no one person works the same way. So let's talk about this and let's have accountability both ways, because to Sarah's culture champion point, I love it. It's amazing. It is driven by more junior people. So to have that running all the way through to the organizations, to have people from all levels show up and show us what is the culture. The culture isn't driven from one level of the organization. Let's break those boundaries down and understand how do we work, what works for us, why are you in the office, why not. We are so receptive to understanding personal circumstances, especially now, that I think we are a bit more open talking about the person behind the worker.
Okay.
And it's great when we see partners doing that, because to be honest, I've overheard you say the chronic ADHD. I wasn't sure if you were serious or if,
Oh,
because I've
deadly.
no, because I've heard very senior leaders say, "Oh, I'm just being very ADHD about it," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're saying that."
I have a
you know?
diagnosis to prove.
Yeah, no, but that's not
Yeah.
about the point, But
No.
it's it needs to be somewhat deliberate to have that human connection, and no one is asking for anyone to trauma dump and tell you their deepest share as much as you want to, in order to facilitate this working relationship that can be so productive and so healthy. And the reason why, and I'm going to sing praises all the way around, why this level at Heidrick that we belong to works so well, is because we communicate, we know each other's boundaries, we know how each other work. I'll know that Sarah has a son who may be ill, so working around that, Sarah knows that my dog has pancreatitis, which is
And our dogs are called the same name.
and our dogs are called the same name. But
Important.
she also knows that it's not a human child, but my dog means a lot to me. That's also another thing that
So it's
sometimes the
understanding
things
piece.
that matter to me
Yeah.
as a young millennial, it may not resonate with you, but that doesn't mean that they're any less important.
And while
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that I can't be empathetic,
Mhm.
Yeah.
understanding, curious, and again, now we're coming back to that human-centered leadership. piece.
Compassionate. That's the
Compassionate.
next step.
We're
yeah.
definitely going to do an episode on neurodiversity, by the way, because it keeps
Yeah.
coming up again and again. In fact, some keynotes I did recently, some of the senior leaders came up and actually said, this is something that we can talk about. By the way, I was only diagnosed because of my daughter about 18 months ago. So in some ways, I'm processing what that diagnosis means to the decades of my life where I've struggled with stuff. And now in some ways, someone said to me, do you feel comfortable now that you've actually got a diagnosis? And in many ways I said, yeah, now I'm kind of starting to understand why I've struggled in certain ways and why I am how I am. All right. And that can be great in some ways, maybe, and positively annoying in other ways. I don't know.
Adam,
But,
does that
yeah.
make you view the world differently now that you have a diagnosis?
Oh, good
does that make you,
question,
kind of view the world in a different way? Or
Oh, great question. I don't know whether it does. You know what it does? It gets me to view me differently.
Okay.
And maybe is starting to give me not even answers. It might be that it's posing me different questions in relation to how I show up or what I struggle with. And the fact that you have got ADHD and you know that, in ways, I'm really glad that my 19-year-old daughter has been diagnosed as well, because I'm thinking, how would I have been if I had that diagnosis at 19, not now, many
At
decades.
15, I got my diagnosis.
So in some ways, maybe that's helpful. But
Yeah.
I know we digress on this, but again, it's about this openness of leadership, isn't it? And as you say, the curiosity, the empathy, the understanding, the compassion. And this comes to that point that I read in the articles that this is about personalized leadership, to be heard, really, really heard. But I'm mindful that, kind of what are your thoughts in relation to this hybrid world? What is it you want, you're aiming for?
You know what I really love about the hybrid world, or why I think also it's so hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
We work with so many different people across the globe, and as much as I love to travel, and have the opportunity to, speaking to someone at 7 a.m. in the US or from Asia is a huge opportunity, and you wouldn't get that if you would have to count on travel and the expense that comes with it, but
Sure.
also childcare and arranging everything around it. So I think it's a massive opportunity to actually just still have that exposure. But also I love the face-to-face, and I think there shouldn't be a price on, you need to come in this amount of time to the office, because as we've already established, it's such an individualistic way of what's working for you. If you have an assessment really early in the morning and then you have to report, right, you don't really want to go to the office to sit in another office within the office, but actually not network or have coffee with people. And I've got to admit, when I go to the office, I spend half my morning just saying hi to everyone and
That's the connection
giving
piece,
hugs
right?
It's productive.
and seeing people. Yeah, I'm feeling so much better, thanks, TA.
TA, you're getting a lot of shout outs in this episode, which is great. And I think we're going to get TA in here soon as well and get her on camera. But so this is useful to understand how it is different for everybody. Jacob, thoughts for you having just come back from Glasgow? I'm not jealous.
I'm just very similar to Leah. So I knew that I needed silence in order to do traditional work, and I haven't actually reevaluated what the office means to me. And actually, this concept of out of office is something I'm going to take away from this session and actually really think about and employ, because I kind of thought that the office had lost its purpose, especially in its traditional sense. The layout that we have, where it's like lots of desks, there isn't that area to collaborate. So what's that?
I love that.
Exactly.
Floris, thank
When
you.
we're in the innovation,
Thank you.
innovation corner, it's going to change the world.
Going to keep trying, aren't we? Yeah, ad nauseum, without a doubt.
But I just I think it's important to kind of reevaluate and realize actually the purpose of going into the office isn't to do work in the traditional sense and write reports. It's to collaborate, connect, and talk to people.
But we're doing work now. This is the office.
Yeah.
How does this feel?
I have a question for you now.
Uh-oh. Is it on sport?
Oh, God, no.
No, okay, right.
So, because the four of us, know each other relatively well,
Yes.
Even though Jacob's abandoned us for 6 months, none of us are
For good
jealous.
reason, though, to travel.
But we've been here for not that long. Just from the conversations we've had, do you think that you would work with us more effectively than you did 2 hours ago?
Of course. And that's, I come back to this piece about leadership is energy expensive, where you've got to now really start to get to know people. And I line manage some people and I mentor some people, and I consider that a real privilege. But there are there's a lot of young talent in the office now, so it's incumbent upon me and you to try and stimulate this connection and to understand. And it is not just about, hi, I'm Adam and this is what I do at Heidrick and I've been there for 3 years, or actually, I want to know about the fact that you're married and you've got kids, or you've got dogs and you've got ADHD, whatever, because that's then starting to understand the person. It comes back to human-centered leadership, right?
But I think that step needs to happen from the top down. Because accountability is something that comes up a lot, and I do agree when Floris says that we need to start the conversation, which we are doing, but there are certain conversations where everyone is so busy in the office, especially partners. We see your diaries. We feel sorry for you, So that step isn't always easy, especially on the more junior you are. To where is the boundary? So there needs to be that the conversation that needs to, and that's what I would wish for the leaders who may or may not be listening here, to think about how can you create that environment where that's possible, and where you don't feel like, as a more junior person, you don't feel like you're overstepping, because it is very hard to do that, especially if it's your first job or one of your first jobs.
Sure. Well, I'm going to come back to this initiative, because Voices of Future Leaders and what TA has started, and even what we're doing now, this has got to help, hasn't it?
We hope so.
Yeah.
This has got to help. I'm hoping there'll be lots of people, and again, I hope global leaders are listening to this and watching this and thinking, well, this is going to be how my millennials and Gen Z are feeling, and I need to reflect on. You've only got to get one person to reflect on one thing from this episode, and this is job done. So I've always got quite modest aspirations, but if that happens, that would be great. Listen, the world has gone mildly bonkers. I know you've done a cost of living article as well, but it's one thing after the other, isn't it? We had the pandemic and Brexit, cost of living, war in Ukraine. There's always something going on. How do you feel about the world right now and the role that organisations have in it? I'm coming in, I suppose, back to a little bit the world better led, but how are you coping with this constant change and disruption? How does it feel? And you've got young kids as well, and I've got teenagers coming into the world, and I'll be lying if I said I wasn't mildly concerned about what is the world looking like for them as they start their careers and lives. But for you, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? That's just killed the mood. But
You know, I think two things. So I'm viewing it in two aspects.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a mother, but also as a employee, but also someone who's highly driven to achieve something. And looking at the world and how complicated it is, and how I feel it gets more complex by the minute with people politicians and social media and
Yep.
things being blown out of proportions and other things that I don't get as much attention. It makes me sad a lot of the time that how things were when I was little, perhaps, or what my parents experienced. But on another occasion, also for me, it's one step at a time. Let's see where I can only make it as good as I can,
Mhm.
because I don't control the whole
control the
world.
controllables.
Yeah, and I think it's really about what can I put my energy against, and what can I control. And for me, the most important thing for me is my son. So
Yeah.
I will make sure that he has everything he needs, the support he can get, and I will support the business I'm in, the colleagues and my friends. And I think it's about thinking big picture, where do I want to go, but also, encountering that there will be obstacles, and it's okay.
It's inevitable.
Yeah,
in
and
some ways.
it's okay.
Other thoughts?
Ooh. Okay,
I kind of agree with Sarah's point, is that you control what you can control, shape the environment that you want to be in. Your environment is the stimuli that your brain kind of works off. So if you're staring at terrible news for 12 hours of the day, of course you're going to be depressed off the back of it. I'm not saying that we need to be ignorant to these points, but you just need to shape the environment that you want to live in and understand yourself. So for me, I realized that light was really important. So that makes me feel good, having a lot of light in my room. So that's an imperative to me, is that I need to have lots of light coming in, big windows, etc., etc., and that will make me feel better. So I know
Sunshine would be nice as well.
yeah,
right?
sunshine would be good. Yeah, it's just a fake light outside the window, but it does the job. But yeah, just like kind of shaping that environment so that to the things that you react well off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be a bit more negative. I think so. You're asking how, with everything that's happening,
How do you feel it?
not good.
Okay.
I think it is. If you really think about it, there's a war going on still that we've almost a little bit forgotten about, but it's still going on. The COVID is also still going on. There was another black man shot by police or killed by police in America. These things happen constantly. They constantly affect people around us, and it can really get you down. And I think that's why I find it important that I feel like what I do, as much of a corporate job this is,
Yep.
that I feel like it does something, it matters in some way, and that the people who represent where I work, that their stance matters to what I care. That's not very eloquent,
I know
but
what you
that
mean.
our values are aligned, because this world it can get you down. It's sometimes I have to shut off the news, and sometimes I sit at work and I'm like, does this matter? And then I think about it. I'm like, you know what? It does though, because corporations have so much sway, and a world better led means that the people are more open. That's why DE&I flows through everything that we do, any offering we have. That's why people are so receptive. I go to people a lot and say, hey, this assessment isn't really useful for people like me, or anyone who has a neurodivergency, dyslexia, dyspraxic, autism, anything. And to know that there are people who care enough to make changes that may be costly, that may be time intensive, and take the time to listen. Or that we go around and say, hey, I'd like to do something for International Women's Day, I'd like to do something for Black History Month, and that there's an organization that's receptive to that. Not that we don't have way more we can and should be doing, anyone does. So that's that accountability piece. But the little insignificant person that I am in the grand scheme of the universe, that's not even self-deprecating, just like what I want to do something that makes a little bit of a difference, even if it's just, like you said, to one person listening. And this is why, and Sarah and I talk about it in the article, an empathetic leadership. It's not just you being empathetic to me or to any of us, but leaders being empathetic that beyond the organization. And because
The outside in.
it's that organizations exist not in a vacuum. Corporations have so much sway. You exist in a community, in a wider ecosystem, and the expectations for leaders, they go beyond the four walls of an organization now. And we see that. I know exactly which organization said something when Roe v. Wade was overturned and who didn't. Because we care about that and we look into that. And
So you're
especially
vigilant in relation to...
It's not even vigilant, it's just on our radar. We are the generation of technology. Patagonia put out a great statement on LinkedIn. Heidrick put out a post internally, globally.
Yeah.
And if you look for, especially if you're trying to look for a job, and we're still in a war for talent, these things matter more than ever. And I don't quite think leaders think about that yet.
It's interesting. There's a phrase I worked with one organisation, and actually they talked about being a force for good, and it's something that I've always got in the back of my mind: is how is our organisation, any organisation, a force for good? Floris, what are you thinking about this?
I'd say I'm incredibly optimistic. Actually, the reason why is in large part due to the great people I get to work with in our offices. And that that our colleagues care about what we do. I recognize how incredibly privileged I am that I care about the work that I do, even though we're just a speck in the universe. I can say that I'm pushing in the right direction. So that's incredibly gratifying. I'm even more optimistic as I'm in my mid-20s, but as I look to younger down to younger generations, my cousins are 10 years younger than I am, and they're infinitely less prejudiced than I am. So humanity is getting more humane as we go along. So I'm happy with the steps that I'm making on a personal level, and I'm also happy that the younger generation is going to take over after me because they're far farther along than I am. And then at the same time, I'm eager to hold leadership, government feet to the fire. That
as the accountability piece.
Exactly. That we're behind on a lot of things that are important, and we've chosen profit over people too often, and that we have a choice to make. There's, even Heidrick, we had a record year last year. How do we go about that? What does that mean as a firm? What do we choose to do with a year like that? What do our...
Well, it's that to be sustainable, isn't it, from a financial perspective, but still be a force for good.
Yeah, mm-hmm. and I think, speaking from the top down, I think we've got a CEO who has doubled down on leadership and what our role is in that ecosystem. And I'm proud to be a part of a firm that espouses that goal. And there's an accountability from our generation that good isn't good enough, and we got to keep pushing the agenda, and we can't be satisfied. I think that's kind of the push and pull of leadership, and people who aren't in leadership yet is we keep you uncomfortable, and that forces steady change. That's our responsibility now, and I'm looking forward to when my cousins are calling me boomer, and that I need to step up and change.
Don't be too much in a hurry. Floris,
when they make you feel uncomfortable as the leader.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so much that we could unpack. We could go on for hours. We really could. I've got a final question for you. I want all of you to think about this almost rapid fire answer. Who is the leader that you aspire to become? You will be leading teams within Heidrick or beyond, you will be leading organizations. You will be charged with the duty of being a force for good, make the world a better place. So what type of leader do you want to become? Jacob, you look like
This
you.
isn't an individual. This is just the type, so like the behaviors that we're showing.
Because
Is
my
that- I just wanna
first thought
check-
was TA. I
I
was
was
like,
like, an
Oh,
individual.
everyone,
He's right.
TA again. TA, you are doing rather well. In the, no, I mean, what type of leader do you want? Do you want to become? Do you want to be known for?
Yeah, I just want to be someone who shows respect and care for the people that I work with. So that's number one.
Yep.
And then number two is just like we've talked about it a lot, but we live in a very complicated world. I just want to make things simple for the people I work with.
Okay.
Have a lot of clarity in terms of what's required, what's needed, and yeah, just have some enjoyment as well.
Fun.
Like we're doing this for 50 years. I don't want to be bored for 50 years. Let's have some fun with it. So yeah, they're the three things that I think are
All right.
truly important to me.
Sarah, what are you thinking?
Inspiring.
Yep.
Compassionate. And supportive, I would say. I think are really key drivers. And you can have loads of different behaviors that sit underneath, but I think it's really about to shape the environment around it. You need to understand the people that you work with and that you can support and that you can guide. And I think it's, we talked about it a lot, about that non-hierarchical approach, but that you have people working with you rather than for you, and you give them the freedom to make decisions, but also be decisive in the decisions to make. And I think that's where I would like to be.
Okay.
I would like to be a self-aware leader on all fronts, knowing where my boundaries are, and surrounding myself with the people that can complement, and knowing what I don't know, I think is really important. And having, and in addition to that, I think self-awareness is so important because we're not perfect. And in addition to that, holding up to the expectations I'm setting now, which is transparency, care, human-centered, and just good in the simplest terms.
All right. Floris.
What I like to tell myself in moments when I'm stressed out or under pressure is to remember my inner child, as I like to refer to it. We did an unfreezing session with a large part of the office last week.
That's a culture session, just for anyone listening, watching. Just
and we got shown a picture of a wheelbarrow that was
I remember.
wasn't the wheelbarrow that we know it, generally speaking. And so we got an opportunity to critique the wheelbarrow, what's wrong with it technically, etc. And we were always pretty pessimistic as adults, like it's never going to work, the handle's too short, etc., etc. And the grand reveal was that the wheelbarrow is used to raise cement on construction sites. So it's a very purposeful wheelbarrow, and it works the way it should. And we got shown comments from kids who were super positive. They're like, "Oh, like it's perfect. You can roll it up right to the edge of the hole that you need to fill, and you can, if you have a latch on the bottom, it relieves the mess." And so that kind of got me thinking on reminding myself that life's too long to be serious all the time. Have more fun, as Jacob and what you say quite regularly. And as a kid, you generally know what's right and what's good, and you're not clouded by what other people think. And so the courage that you have as a kid to just kind of do it without thinking about it, that's the kind of leader I'd like to be.
Maybe we'll all bring our inner child into the workplace. And we talk about fun, don't we? We talk about fun with a purpose. Have you had some fun?
Absolutely.
Yes.
How's this been for you?
Great.
Yeah, it's good.
Energetic.
Yeah, inspiring.
Yeah.
Well, it takes the conversation further, doesn't it? So I think this has got to be relevant to anyone leading out there, whether it's a small, medium or large organization. We've got to understand. I think I had one of my guests, Raquel Focardi, who came in and said there's going to be 5 generations working in one organization. So we have to start to understand how we all work, what's the dynamic in order to be successful. And I wish all of you the very best of success as you go on to become those leaders that you've described and take over the world, or at least make it a better place. Listen, thanks very much for coming into the Leadership Enigma. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Adam.
That's a wrap. And it's as simple as that.
Join us again next week for more tips and strategies on the Leadership Enigma. We'd love to hear your comments on today's show, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests. Get in touch with your host on LinkedIn or visit the dedicated website, www.leadersenigma.com, powered by Transform Performance International, where you can access our exclusive learning, including books, videos, bonus content, assessments, and more. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.